friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tash, and ever since I read Katabasis by R.F. Kuang, I have been completely obsessed with it. So today I've decided I'm going to do a deep dive into this lovely book, the story, the themes, and include a little bit at the end to showcase some of the comments that I've had on my read-along on Storygraph. So if you're interested in that, make sure you stick around. Although do be warned that this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't read Katabasis yet and you're planning on it, make sure you go and do that first and then come back to this video. My read along for this is still open, so make sure you click that link in the description, and without further ado, let's get into the first section of this video, which is a spoiler-free review. For those of you that are still here who haven't read the book yet, think of this as your should I read the book section, and coming from my maybe slightly unhinged opinion, yes, absolutely, 100%. This book is brilliant. I am a huge R.F. Kuang fan anyway. I have read the entire Poppy War trilogy as well as Yellowface. The only one I haven't read yet is Babel. So I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, even though I hadn't really dipped my toe into the dark academia side of her writing quite as much. And a lot of the things I heard about this book did give me some reservations, so I was a bit nervous, but she absolutely knocked it out of the park with this one. I kept hearing that it was overly dense and too academic and a little bit pretentious, and I did not find that at all. I find that R.F. Kuang manages to balance intellect with emotion so well. The story is so lyrical, it's so rich, and it drops you straight into the action from the very first page. It didn't take me long to get into it at all. That might be because I did the audiobook plus physical reading combination, which I thought was a really, really great way to consume this book. I thought the narration was fantastic. The whole vibes were just amazing. And the narration really captures the mood and the tones and the tension so well. It is a bit of a slower read, which I find with most of her work, but the pacing really gives you room to absorb and process what's going on and the characters' emotions and what is actually happening to them and within them. On the surface, there's not a huge amount of plot, although I say that having spent literal hours writing out the plot for this video. It's more about the emotional unraveling of Alice in particular, but both of the main characters, and it is so riveting and so engaging to follow. Maybe my only critique is that it's kind of marketed as a love story. It literally says "to hell with love" on the top, and I kind of think marketing it as a love story is doing it a bit of a disservice, because there is romance in here, definitely, but it's not the main focus, and it wasn't even the thing that I loved most about this book. What I enjoyed about this was the exploration of the themes of ambition and exploitation and power, and choosing to live the life that you want, not the life that you think you should have. So that would be my only criticism, but that still doesn't keep it from being an amazing 5-star read. And just a point on the criticism I see a lot, that this book feels pretentious. And I think some people felt like R.F. Kuang was kind of flaunting her like multiple PhDs and things in this book, whereas I didn't find that at all. I honestly think if the way that this book should be interpreted is the complete opposite, it really is a criticism of intellectualism. It's quite a brutal one. She doesn't hold back, which again she's known for with Yellowface, and which in and of itself is a criticism of the publishing industry. Katabasis does almost exactly the same thing, but with academia and intellectualism, and I loved that. I loved that from this book. It's not an easy read. It does take a little while to get through it. It is a bit more slow paced, but it is absolutely fantastic. So if you are on the fence about it, I would definitely recommend going and giving this a read and then coming back to this video and watching the rest of it. Final warning, we are now getting into serious spoiler territory. If you haven't read it, go and read it and then come back and we can talk about it. But this is your final warning. If you don't want spoilers, please look away now. But if you're still here, let's get into what is the plot of Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. The story kicks off during Michaelmas term at Cambridge, where we meet Alice Law, who is an analytical magic student, and she's a bit of a mess. She's a little bit all over the place, and she is planning on doing something a little bit mental, which is going to hell to retrieve the soul of her academic advisor, Professor Jacob Grimes, who recently perished in a tragic magical accident. And she needs his soul back in his body so that she can finish her degree. And it seems like she kind of feels a bit guilty about something related to this accident as well. So she's doing good. She's doing great. And then as she's finishing her preparations on the chalk pentagram that she draws, her brilliant but very unreliable academic rival, Mr. Peter Murdoch, barges in, fixes her little pentagram, says that's wrong, you need to change that, and basically blags his way into going with her. I guess she kind of thinks, well, two's better than one, so we might as well. They've got the same goal in mind, they want to do the same thing, so she lets him come along, and they pay the entrance fee into hell, which is half of their lifespans. Bargain. And off they go. And what I really liked about the opening of this book is that it's really clear from the get-go that these two have kind of like a strained relationship. There's something going on between them, whether it's romantic and something has ended that romance, or we don't know, but there's some kind of history between these two, and it's definitely going to make things interesting as we go along. So once they're in hell, got my little script, sorry. Once they're in hell, they land on a lovely little stretch of ashen wasteland under a blood red sky. What else would you expect from the landscape of hell? And they stumble across this place called the Viewing Pavilion, which is basically a cosmic window that allows the dead to see what the living are up to. And while they look up, they kind of see that the other Cambridge students that they know are trying to figure out what's happened to them and where they've gone. And it's just a little fun reminder that they might not actually make it back. There's no guarantees that they're going to make it back home, even less so having completed the mission that they have in mind. From there, they wander into the fields of Asphodel, where they meet the shades of 4 undergraduate students that had all studied under Professor Grimes in the past and had all died. I think it was in a fire. It was a magical accident, but that caused a fire that they then died in. And they are stuck reliving their deaths on loop. Crazy. But the reason that this is happening is because hell, in this sense, is a place where you undergo tests, and once you've passed those tests, you can then reincarnate into a new body. But once you reincarnate, you lose all that you were previously. And what I love is that these students represent the fear of losing your intellectual abilities. They don't want to forget who they were, because who they were was just so smart. They were just so smart, and they don't want to forget that, which is very Cambridge core. Very elitist academia of them. But they tell Alice and Peter that Professor Grimes is not there. He's not in the fields of Asphodel, which means he's moved on to the 8 courts, which represent different sins, I guess you could say. So they carry on they go, and they come to a massive wall made of bone, the bones of the dead. And there's a huge queue of shades that are waiting to just get into hell, basically. And Peter and Alice don't have time to wait for that, so they decide to climb the wall. And while they're climbing, Peter discloses to Alice that he's afraid of heights, which is very handy. So she kind of helps him, sort of coaches him through the climb and helps them get to the peak. And this is a moment that is really representative of their relationship as it stands, that it's messy, it's dangerous, and held together by just like sheer pride. So they get to the top, and they get to look over the topography of hell, and it's constantly shifting, it never stays the same, and it's basically unmappable, which leads them to a lovely conversation about whose map is more accurate. Let me have a look, see if I can find the pictures. I'll show the ones at the back actually. So Alice's map and Peter's map, which he lovingly described as a pizza anus. Or did Alice describe it as that? I think Alice described it as a pizza anus, which did give me a bit of a chuckle. Anyway, they get to the bottom of the wall. They are exhausted, and all of the frustration and anxiousness really boils over, and they just start scrapping. They have a little fight about stolen fellowships, petty slights, academic elitism, all the good stuff. but it kind of reveals to each other and to us how wounded and insecure both of them are, and how they are both so deeply affected by the stress and the constant pressure of academia and what it does to you and the people around you and how you interact with others. And they kind of come to a somewhat tentative truce at this point. They kind of decide to put the differences aside. They're gonna sort this out. They're gonna do this together. And then hell starts shifting and the wall behind them dissolves and it reassembles itself into a gothic version of Cambridge, which is what has always confused me about the argument that R.F. Kuang is trying to be like all pretentious and upper self about her education, when hell is literally the campus, it's literally the university. I don't know how much more obvious you can make it that she's being critical of that very system. Anyway, they make their way into the first court of hell, which is Pride, which presents itself as a grand library where all of the souls are forced to define the good, where they can only move on from Pride and be reincarnated if they can define the good, which is basically just the worst project ever. I think they have to just write like essays and essays and then get them graded, and if they don't get it right then they don't move on, and some souls have been there for thousands and thousands of years, which is, as much as I love libraries, I don't know if that's necessarily for me. So in the library they meet the shade of George Edward Moore, who is pretty much just the world's angriest librarian. He is kind of obsessed with all the rules of this library and wants to keep things in order, wants to keep all the other souls in line, and he tries to conscript Alice and Peter into staying with him in the library to keep everything in shipshape. And they've obviously got bigger and better things to do, so they say no, and he tries to trap them there. And this is kind of where the interesting come in. I don't really know how else to describe them, but basically to escape, Alice traps George Edward Moore in an infinite regress, which basically means, and I'm forgive me if I get this wrong, but it basically means that it's basically a circle where a circle of logic, like a paradox. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a paradox, and he gets stuck in this infinite regress, and they manage to escape without ever defining the good, which is crazy. And when they escape, they come face to face with the Lethe, which is the river of forgetfulness. And Alice almost gets lured into the waters by Meng Po, who is a goddess in Chinese mythology, the goddess of forgetfulness, who would make this soup that it's basically the idea of reincarnation. You would make the soup and it would create a blank slate so you could move on to the next life. And she's kind of like, Alice, come on, you can do this. You can just move on and forget everything and everything will be lovely. And Alice is tempted by this idea. She almost wants to fall into oblivion, which is quite sad, but Peter manages to slap her out of it. He doesn't slap her out of it, he snaps her out of it. And they continue following the river when they're attacked by these bone things, these bone wolf things, which are stitched together with chalk, which is the tool that magicians use to do their magic, but which is odd. That means that there are other magicians doing their thing down in hell, and they obviously don't want Alice and Peter to be doing whatever they're doing, so oh dear. But the wolves don't like the Lethe. They don't want to go into the Lethe because then they'll basically be done. And Alice and Peter kind of realise that their chalk doesn't work. Chalk just doesn't, it just sinks into the silt, and they can't use their usual tricks, magic tricks, to get them out of this situation, which is a big problem because that's kind of literally all they do. And I quite like that as a commentary on intellectualism can't get you out of any issue. You can't just rely on being clever to solve all your problems. You have to have other useful skills. That's just how I read it anyway. So they reach Desire, the second court, Desire, which manifests as like the most cursed student centre ever, where souls are trapped in endless loops of pleasure, whether that's sex, food, validation. And Alice and Peter are really uncomfortable by this because they're forced to confront how academia has basically fried their ability to deal with desire or human needs of any kind. Eventually, a storm kicks them out of Desire. They realise that Grimes isn't there, and a storm ends up kicking them out and pushes them straight into the path of more of these bone creatures who During the fight, Alice learns that the Lethe dissolves these things, but falls into the river herself. Oh no, she's gonna forget everything. She's gonna forget who she is, she's gonna forget all about magic, everything's gonna go wrong. But then she resurfaces and she's completely unscathed. And that is because of a pentagram that Professor Grimes had tattooed on her arm when they were in Vienna. It has given her perfect memory, but also kind of just completely messes you up. So this is something that Peter then discovers, and it's kind of another moment of bonding, of vulnerability, where they start to understand each other just a little bit more and understand that maybe Grimes isn't as worth saving as they thought he was. So it's a nice moment, and it's lovely, it's sweet, and then things start to go a little bit wrong again. And that's when Alice finds an organic exchange spell in Peter's notes and immediately assumes that his intention is to swap her soul for Professor Grimes's. So she thinks he's going to leave her trapped in hell and then take Professor Grimes home with him. Spoiler alert, that's not what's going to be happening, but that's what Alice thinks, because Alice doesn't trust anyone, because Alice is so deeply broken that she immediately is like, oh my god, he's gonna kill me. That's just what's happening. So that brings back all of the anxiety and mistrust that has kind of been getting put away throughout the story. It all comes bubbling back up again for Alice. And when they're at the border of the courts of greed and wrath, they meet the Weaver Girl, who offers them a loyalty test in exchange for a shortcut to find Professor Grimes. And if anyone's seen the UK show Golden Balls, that's what was going through my mind during this scene. Specifically the finale, the final bit of that TV show. That may be a very niche reference, but if you know, you know. It's very, very tense, but basically they have to choose if they're going to continue together or if they're going to continue alone. And if they both choose together, great, that's wonderful. But if one of them chooses together and one of them chooses alone, one that chose together dies and the one that chose alone gets to continue. So Peter, obviously, because he is the world's nicest man, chooses together. Whereas Alice, because she's so full of mistrust and she's almost paralyzed by the choice, it's kind of uncertain whether she chose alone knowingly or if she kind of accidentally chose it. But she chooses alone, which kind of dooms Peter. Like, she basically said fuck you, which he's not a happy bunny about. He's not happy about this choice. So Peter is doomed to Weaver Girl, but right before anything can happen, they are swarmed by bone creatures, but then also rescued by Elspeth Bayes, who is a former student of Professor Grimes who killed herself a few decades ago. Now, on her boat, traversing the Lethe on a lovely boat, Elspeth finally tells us who the bad guys are, and they are the Kripkes, who are magicians. They were magicians of very little renown, but they kind of traverse hell in a nomadic way, searching for, let me pronounce this right, the Dialethea. The Kripkes and also their child are roaming around hell, searching for the Dialethea, which is a true contradiction that would supposedly guarantee your escape from hell. Now, it's kind of hinted at that Elspeth knows where the Dialethea is, but she won't share that information with Alice and Peter, which is frustrating for them because that could be a really useful bargaining tool when they get to Lord Yarmer's court and are trying to bargain for Grimes's soul. Lord Yarmer being kind of like the Hades, the Lord of the Underworld stand-in that they're going for. So they want the Dialethea just as much as anyone else. So they try and trick Elspeth into telling them where it is with a liar's paradox, but she catches on immediately. And when she finds out that their true mission is to save Professor Grimes, she is not happy. She throws them off that boat faster than you can say sorry. Like, she wants no part in this. She doesn't kill them, but she is like, I am not helping you any further. Good luck with that shit. And yeah, she throws them off the boat and they get stuck in the Court of Wrath. So in Wrath, they are stuck in the bog of Wrath. They're running out of resources and they are fighting off angry shades with the last few drops of the River Lethe that they have. But it's not going well for them. Eventually, they make their way to the Court of Violence, where they fall into an Escher trap, which is, in this case, is an infinite loop of stairs designed by the Kripkes to slowly shatter their minds. Now, if you are familiar with the movie Labyrinth, you may be familiar with this version of an Escher trap. Escher was an artist, he was a Dutch artist that's kind of specialized in this really surreal style of art that is kind of like impossible shapes and things like that, like the two hands drawing each other. That's Escher. Obviously, oh my god, I'm so silly. That's what it is. That's the Escher trap. It's been sat right next to me the whole time. Anyway, this is where everything unravels, and we kind of take a little bit of a break from the action and really get to dive deep into these characters. And Alice confesses that she is actually the cause of the accident that killed Professor Grimes. And she also tells Peter that Professor Grimes tried to force himself on her, and when she rejected him, he became very cold and distant and didn't favour her anymore. At the same time, Peter confesses to her that he has Crohn's disease, and that's why he's not really on campus as much as everyone else, because he physically can't be. And it's quite sad getting to learn about these characters' pasts, and it really helps you understand why they have such a drive to be the best of the best. But through these confessions, they finally piece together that Grimes is the issue. He's the problem. He's been pitting them against each other and manipulating them this whole time, and he used them like tools for his own gain. And upon this realization, Alice also admits her true reason for coming to hell, and it wasn't to free Professor Grimes, but to destroy him. She planned to return his soul into his dead, decaying body and use him as a tool, as he had used her. I aspire to be that petty. I aspire to be that unhinged. She was literally going to keep the guy in the basement and force him to help her be the greatest magician to ever live. Great plan in my book. Peter, meanwhile, explains what his plan was with the organic exchange spell that we saw earlier. And he's such a good guy. He was planning to sacrifice his soul so that Grimes and Alice could escape hell together. I love him so much. He's so sweet. I love Peter. Speaking of Peter, we're still trapped in this Escher trap, and Peter realizes there is only one way to escape, and he uses the Hangman's Paradox to catapult Alice to freedom while trapping himself there. And she watches as the Kripkes claim his soul, and then she's all alone. And she's really feeling this. She is really feeling the loss of Peter. This has broken her, essentially, and she gets very close to just ending it all, resigning herself to being trapped here or letting it all wash away and just moving on. So she carries on reluctantly. She trudges through the courts of cruelty and tyranny until she reaches the city of Dis, which is a place for rebels, which is a place for souls that are completely against moving on, essentially. And she's sort of guided around the city by the shade of John Gradus. And throughout this little period of the book, she kind of learns how boring it is to be stuck here. She sees the monotony of life as a shade. And even though she is tempted to give up and forget it all, the reality of this eternal boredom convinces her to carry on. And she decides that she is done being hunted, and if she's going to make it out alive and get to live her life, she has got to kill the Kripkes. So she uses blood magic, or something I didn't mention is they figure out through Elizabeth that they can use chalk, but chalk also has to be imbued with blood to work. So she uses blood magic, every trick that she's ever been taught to take on the Kripkes. And it's a harsh final battle. Like, bitch really holds her own, but she doesn't get out of there unscathed. Like, she takes a few good hits. So one of the Kripkes ends up falling into the Lethe, and his wife and their child willingly follow him into reincarnation, which is, I guess, kind of a bit of a deus ex machina, but, you know, she was about this close away from death, and just one of them gets in the Lethe, and the rest of them are like, well, I guess that's us done then. They all wanted to be together. I think that's a bit nice, even if they were trying to kill Alice the whole time. John Gradus was also there, sort of watching this all happen, and he manages to board a boat that takes him to the afterlife, to reincarnation, but this boat actually rejects Alice, and dumps her into the Lethe, which then dissolves the tattoo on her arm along with her memories. But she clings to the last fragments of Peter as she slowly slips towards oblivion. This is it for her. She is dying, she's moving on. But then Elspeth returns, drags her out of the Lethe and tells her to get herself together. Elspeth tells Alice that she actually found the Dialetheia and that's why the Crypt Keys were hunting her. And in a lovely moment, she gives the Dialetheia to Alice and sails her to the Lord of Death's island. There, Alice presents the Dialetheia to King Yama, who summons the soul of Grimes. Now, this was such an interesting part of the book because we had only ever seen Professor Grimes through memory, through the memories of Alice, the memories of Peter, and Grimes, the piece of shit he is, reveals that he has just been straight up haunting Alice. He's been egging her on to come here. And he wants her to stay in hell with him forever to study it. You know, Alice, thankfully, because she actually has learned something throughout this journey, says, no thank you, I'm good. And uses all of the skills that she has acquired during her journey throughout hell to bind Grimes and just completely destroy him, which felt very cathartic to me. And then a door opens and through it walks Peter Murdoch, alive and scarred, but back. Hooray! Together, they bargain the Dialetheia for safe passage back home, and they manage to somehow swindle King Yama out of the half of the lifespan that they exchanged to get into hell. They managed to get him to give that back, which crazy, but okay. And Yama agrees. He opens a staircase for them that leads them out of hell, similar to Orpheus and Eurydice, except this time there is no trick, there is no trap. One does not need to walk in front while the other one stays behind. They climb, they emerge beneath the stars above Cambridge, and they choose each other. They choose the living world over the glory of academia and intellectualism, the very thing that dragged them into hell in the first place. So I think it all wrapped up really nicely. And again, I just can't help but think, how do people not see that that was the whole point of the book? It's not about Alice and Peter being like, oh, we're so clever, that's why we succeeded. That's Alice and Peter being like, shit, we thought we were so clever, but actually we weren't. And we're better off now that we know that being clever isn't the be-all and end-all. Anyway, that was Katabasis. And that was probably a really crap, very unhinged recap for anyone listening, but that's the best I've got. So here we are. So now that we've crawled out of hell together, I want to talk about some of the themes of this book, because that's what books like this are all about. They're all about the themes. It's not about what actually happens, it's about what's happening when you read between the lines. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not just about two brilliant academics having a fun stroll through hell. It's got so many layers, you know. Onions have layers, Katabasis has layers. See what I'm saying? So let's talk about some of those right now. So as I've been literally saying all the way through, Katabasis is really strong on the theme of academia as actual hell. Not metaphorical, actual hell. And she doesn't just imply that academia is like hell. She literally says, no, hell is literally Cambridge. Cambridge, we just saw Cambridge up there. Cambridge is down here in front of us in hell. Hell is Cambridge. And something I think is really cool is that each of the courts is kind of a distorted version of different parts of academic culture. So pride kind of represents the endless debate and moral posturing within academia. Desire is the validation seeking and the pleasure compensating burnout. You know, it's not just celebrities. It's not just famous people that are doing these people are so driven by constant validation and need for success that they can't respond to what their body needs in time. So they end up overcompensating, whether that's through sex or with food or with drugs or anything like that. Wrath represents the envy, the rivalry, the resentment, and then violence is representative of the harm that scholars inflict on each other and themselves to get ahead. It's a toxic environment. People will literally stand on you to get where they need to get. They don't care who they hurt. and you don't care that you hurt yourself if that means that you're going to be the best. And then the city of Dis kind of represents the monotony and the despair of a life that is only defined by your work. You know, a lot of people go into academia and they're like, oh, but I just love it. I love this subject. I love this thing, this topic. I really hate that phrase where people say, work in a field you love and you'll never work a day in your life, because it's such bullshit. It's such bullshit. As much as I love making YouTube videos and I love making content, part of me does think that if I did it all day, every day, I would start to resent it a little bit. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't subscribe, by the way, because I would, from the outside, I would love to be a content creator, but you know, there is a very strong possibility that when you get the thing that you want, that doesn't make you happy. In fact, it makes you miserable. You know, this book isn't a satire. It's anthropology. It's just showcasing human nature within this one specific field. R.F. Kuang takes the real emotional and institutional horrors of academia, the exploitation, the vanity, the competition, and just lays it out very plain in front of you. She just says, this is hell. This is hell. And she would know. She's done it enough times to know what it's like. You know, she's very good at drawing on her own experiences. And as someone who has, not me, but Kuang, at R.F. Kuang, as someone who has faced those struggles, it's very poignant. And yeah, I think, I feel like the book makes it so clear that that's what she's saying. Academia. Academic ambition over all else is hell. Speaking of ambition, Katabasis shows us that ambition is a double-edged sword. Alice is probably one of the most ambitious characters that I've ever read, and that is ambition in the derogatory. She is ambition personified. She's brilliant, driven, obsessive. She's so hungry for meaning and so hungry to achieve that she'll literally bargain half of her life away, drag herself through the 8 circles of hell, and attempt to resurrect quite possibly the worst professor in the world, just to make sure that her work matters, to make sure that she matters. She can't separate herself from her work, which I think is really sad. And R.F. Kuang asks, what is the cost of that? The ambition in this book is, it's intoxicating, it's destructive, it's addictive, and it is indistinguishable from other forms of self-harm. Alice doesn't know how to rest. Alice isn't punished because of her ambition, because ambition in itself isn't bad. She's punished because of what the ambition drives her to do to herself. She's punished because she never learns how to stop. She never learns how to rest. She doesn't know how to want anything else. You know, the descent into hell is both literal and psychological, because she's forced to confront the fact that she just doesn't look after herself. She barely eats, she barely sleeps, she doesn't do anything for her, she doesn't partake in any form of self-care, and that is due to her ambition, and that is the reason that she is so greatly punished throughout this book. She has to hit the bottom before she can ever decide to choose life and choose herself again. She has to hit rock bottom before any of that can happen. And it's really sad, but it's also really cathartic at the end when her and Peter, you know, ascend out of hell and they choose each other and they choose themselves over their ambition. One of the most stunning themes is how R.F. Kuang treats memory as both salvation and torment. The Lethe in itself, the river of forgetfulness, offers peace, oblivion, freedom from pain. And as someone who struggles with, you know, multiple mental health conditions, it really speaks to me. You know, I won't be shy about the fact that I've tried to commit suicide in the past, and the driving force for that, for me, was peace, was freedom from pain. That's all anyone ever wants. You know, the Lethe offers that, and yet by doing so you erase everything about yourself. You erase yourself from memory, from the world. And Alice is more, I don't think Peter's really affected by this, but definitely we get this a lot from Alice. She is tempted multiple times towards the promise of that the Lethe has to offer. She's tempted to forget her trauma, the guilt that she feels, the things that Grimes did to her. She's tempted to forget herself. And rather than accepting that forgetting would be healing. This book urges you to survive through those memories. It urges you to survive with your memories, not in spite of them. And that's what makes the whole idea that Alice is immune from the Lethe so poignant, because she gets to a point where, if she ever got to a point where she was so desperate for release that she would willingly trade herself away for the promise of peace, she physically can't. And that is a representation of the fact that she physically can't because of the tattoo, but also because living is pain. Alice can't let go. She remembers everything painful, everything perfectly. And that memory is both a curse and a power. It can work for her and it can work against her. So I think I love that in the end she's managed to be free of that in some way. She no longer has the perfectly preserved memory, but she also learns to reconcile with the fact that she can't just forget about her problems to make them better. She has to survive despite them. And the role that Peter plays in all this is that he is there to literally bring her back to herself. He's there to remind her who she is when she starts to fade away. Now let's talk about Professor Grimes for a second, because he is the human embodiment of an academic red flag. Grimes is the exact kind of man that institutions like Cambridge reward. He's charismatic, brilliant, manipulative, exploitative. He literally grooms students into competing for his approval and then uses their labour for his own profits and harms them emotionally and physically during the process. And something that R.F. Kuang does in this book is she literally tears down the entire system that lets men like Grimes thrive. And the scariest part is that his students don't hate him. They love him. They admire him. They want his attention. They want his worship. And it's this cycle of academic abuse. You want the man who hurts you to validate you, and you want the person destroying your self-worth to tell you you're brilliant. And it gets to a point where the only time you'll ever believe it is with that person telling it to you. Even when Alice's true plan is revealed, it still entirely revolves around him. You know, she still feels, even though she's planning to torment him forever, she still feels like she needs him to succeed. And Alice descending into hell for Grimes is the ultimate metaphor for academic loyalty gone rotten. The moment that she finally confronts him and finally sees him for who he is and what he's done to both her and Peter, but to all the other students. We see so many students throughout this story that are victims of Grimes, from the Four Shades at the beginning, who I'm fairly certain were still singing his praises. They still loved him, to Elsbeth, who did see him for what he was. But her confrontation at the very end is her emotional resurrection, and it's so cathartic to see her just verbally beat him down and stand up for herself and finally see that she's worth more than that. Going back to what I said during my spoiler-free section, marketing tried to sell Katabasis as a love story, but really it's a partnership story. It's a survival story. It's Alice and Peter saying, we are both traumatized, but at least we're traumatized together. And Alice and Peter they do, but they don't necessarily fall in love in hell. They fall into an understanding of each other. The real arc in this book is them learning to see each other clearly and beginning to unlearn the narratives that Grimes has fed them about themselves and each other. They learn to forgive themselves and feel comfortable choosing vulnerability with each other over resentment. Peter's sacrifice in the Escher trap is love, and Alice risking everything to save him is also love. But them walking out of hell together, so much love, but it's not a romance. It's two broken people choosing each other and choosing the world of the living after finally understanding that that's what they deserve. They deserve to be happy. They deserve to be able to have love. So yes, there is romance. There is a romantic element. It's not a romantic story. It's not a romantasy. It's just two broken people coming together and deciding that they are worth so much more than what they believed before they went on this whole adventure. And at the heart of Katabasis is a simple question. What makes life worth returning to? Is it ambition, knowledge, revenge, obligation? No, it's none of those things. It's connection, it's compassion. It's the willingness to build something new after everything else has been completely burned to the ground. Alice gets to destroy the man that she felt defined her. She abandons the identity that she clung to completely and totally, and manages to climb out of hell back to the real world. And she has Peter there along with her. And I think that the final message of Katabasis is hell is easy, life is harder, but you gotta choose life anyway. Or, in the words of George Washington, dying is easy, young man, living is harder. And I just think it's brilliant. Did you guys know that I did a read-along for Katabasis? Did I ever mention that? I don't think I mentioned it in basically every video I've ever made. Anyway, I have a Katabasis read-along that is open until the end of the year, and you are more than welcome to join. So, I thought it would be fun to kind of wrap this video up with some of the thoughts and comments that I've had in the forums that I had on the read-along page on Storygraph. So let's have a little look-see. So one person pointed out at the very beginning that there was definitely some awkwardness and weirdness with Alice recalling what happened with Professor Grimes, which we obviously know now why that was, but they definitely picked up early on that Alice was just not in a sound state of mind during this time. She was overworked, underpaid, drinking too much caffeine and not eating. That she appeared to be angry and resentful and confused about the professor and how she wanted to die when their eyes met. Alice, what happened? Because that's sus behaviour for sure. If your professor was making you feel like that, why do you even want to go to hell to bring his soul back? Everything we've learned about Professor Grimes so far does not paint him in a good light and makes it sound like he deserves to be in hell for eternity. That's definitely how I felt at the very beginning of Katabasis. I think I wrote at some point very early on that I was concerned. I definitely predicted that Grimes was going to be quite a bit of a freak, that he was going to have done something to Alice in that kind of realm. And I was really sad to see that I was right, but I definitely picked up on that vibe as well. A little bit later into the book, thoughts on Peter so far. I don't have much of an opinion on him yet. I am being led to believe that Peter and Alice were close and had some sort of relationship earlier on and they broke up or drifted apart. I definitely got that kind of vibe too, that I don't think that was the case, but they were definitely friends earlier on. So far, Peter seems genuine and kind. His vulnerability during the climb up the wall was unexpected and refreshing from a male character. The one blanket situation and the wake up the next morning was funny, and Peter was going above and beyond to try and make it clear that it was involuntary and that he would not be disrespectful like that. It was overtly too much, making me wonder if he's aware of some of the sort of bad behaviour from Professor Grimes on undergrad students, or he's aware of the rumours and doesn't want to make Alice uncomfortable in any way. I don't think that was necessarily the case, but I think Peter was just genuinely so horrified at his unconscious reaction, bodily reaction. He was just so horrified that it had happened that he needed to know that it was okay, that Alice didn't hate him for it. Not even 23% of the way in, and it's clear to me Grimes deserves to be in hell and he deserved to die. Not wrong, not wrong. This one was a particularly interesting comment that is kind of mostly the reason why I wanted to do the section. Sorry, I'm trying to adjust my legs without kicking the camera. Someone said, wow, the scene in Helen Murray's office at the end of chapter 20 was brutal. Alice is clearly a victim of Grimes, and Helen's response to Alice when she turns to her for help isn't a particularly warm or charitable one. But it's also sort of a karmic one based on the way Alice regards/acts towards the other women in her field. Alice didn't invent the patriarchy, so she's not exactly living in a hell of her own creation, but she does adopt a cutthroat attitude about it. She's disdainful of other women in her field and thinks that she is somehow fundamentally different from them, that she'll succeed where they've failed because she's tougher, so she's also uninterested in allyship. Helen's response just sort of holds up this icy mirror to Alice's own attitudes, showing her that she, Alice, wouldn't really be interested in any of the kind of help that she, Helen, could offer her anyway. Brutal. That is so true. I remember reading that scene and thinking, God, what the fuck? we live in such an age, or at least in my spheres, of women helping women. We lift each other up because at the end of the day, we're all fighting the same evil in the patriarchy. So when I got to this scene where Helen was very, very cold towards Alice and kind of just told her, get on with it, I was really shocked. But what I love about this comment is that it really calls Alice out because she's so focused and driven by this ambition. She does see herself as special. She does see herself as better, not just than the other people in her field, but specifically the other women in her field. She thinks she's stronger, she's tougher, she's cleverer, she's more intelligent, and that she thinks that she's the only one that's got the guts to stick it out. And Helen's response to Alice going to her for help definitely does hold up a mirror to her own failings as a woman in academia. Just very interesting. Someone said, are Alice and Peter the author and her husband? And I believe this is correct, actually. I'm fairly certain that Alice and Peter are quite heavily based on R.F. Kuang and her husband. And the reason I think this is because I'm fairly sure that R.F. Kuang's husband also has a chronic illness, similar to how Peter does in the book. They're both academics, and there are just a lot of parallels. So I think that is the case, but it never came across that heavy-handed to me in the book. I never felt like, oh, she's just writing about herself and how much she loves her husband and all that stuff. It felt very natural to me, so it didn't bother me at all. And then at the very end of the book, someone mentioned that they found the exchange of souls a bit weird, and they were wondering, where did Peter's soul go in the meantime? And does that mean that hell has its own hell? Which I think are very interesting questions that I don't necessarily think are answerable with the text that we have. But I definitely do wonder what happened to Peter's soul in the time that we lost him in the Escher trap to when he reappeared again. But yeah, there were some, you know, there were a lot of funny things. Someone was very, very taken by the phrase pizza anus. But I'm so interested in doing more read-alongs like this because it really got me thinking about things that I didn't pick up on when I read the book. And I just loved that. I've really enjoyed the whole experience of checking the comments every so often and seeing what other people have to say and seeing the debates that people are having. So yeah, I will definitely be doing more read-alongs in the future. So be prepared for me to be talking more and more about those in my videos going forward. I can't actually believe this, but I've just finished editing the video that you just watched and I've lost my outro section. Don't know where it's gone. So anyway, if you like that video, make sure you hit that like button, and if you want to see more videos from me, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And yeah, have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.